Hi, this is Dan Heisman, and we're continuing with our series of YouTube videos to help you play chess better. Someone wrote to me in my comments to the videos and asked me if I was posting these videos from my old ICC videos, and I said, no, I can't do that. The ICC holds the rights to my ICC videos, and even though sometimes I might remake a similar subject, I can't copy my ICC videos. Only ICC could do that. So all these videos are being made from scratch, but I appreciate the thought. And in fact, this video is going to be similar to one that I did many years ago as well. And it's based on a section of a book that I really love called Chess Curiosities by Tim Krabbe. And I believe this is one of his sections where he talks about building up tactical ideas from a very basic idea to extremely complex ideas. And the original idea was based on, I guess, a comment that was made in a Lasker Simultaneous about 130 years ago by a guy named Loman. And Loman had wondered about an idea that we're going to show you in this first example. So this is white to play. And I always tell my students, well, I could tell you white to play and win, white to play and draw, white to play and mate and 7, but sometimes it's better to just say white and play and do the best he can. Well, the problem white has here, of course, is that his pawn on g6 is attacked, and if he takes the pawn on h7, he'll just trade pawns and he'll be down a pawn in the endgame. But what white can do is play the Loman kind of idea, the deflection. Well, this isn't the Loman twist. This is the setup for the Loman, which is rook to f8 check, king takes f8, and now g takes h7. And because of this pawn being in the way on g7, and the king and the pawn being in the way of getting the rook over here, if I could draw straight lines, white's going to get a queen and he's going to win. So rook f8 check is a pseudo-sacrifice, as we talked about in an earlier video. If you look at that move and say, oh, I can't play there, he'll just take me, that's a quiescence error. But the idea is to deflect the king away from guarding that pawn. He has to take it. It's his only legal move. You take the pawn, you get a queen, and you win. All right, so where does Loman come in? Well, here's something that's a little more similar to what happened to Lasker. So the question here is, can white use a similar idea that he did in the previous case to get a queen? For instance, can he skewer the king and the rook with rook to d8 check? Again, if you're not looking at that move, then and you just say, oh, I can't go there, I'll lose a rook, that might be a quiescence error. If you check him, he has to take the rook. If he moves the king, you just take his rook and you win. So he has to take. And now you push the pawn up to b7, and the king is stopping the rook from coming over, and the pawn is stopping the king from coming over. So it looks like white's getting a queen again. However, this is where our hero of the tale, Loman, comes into play. Loman said, oh, why can't you just play rook to b4 anyway? And this is what's called attraction. You're attracting the king to a square you want it to attract it to. And if he takes the rook, which he has to because otherwise black's rook will take the pawn with an easy win, black now plays check, which is a clearance move. And now black will be able to get to the pawn and draw. For instance, king to b5. If he takes the pawn, then king c7 draws instantly. King to c7. King to a6, threatening king a7. And now black plays king to b8 and says, I'm going to get a queen unless you stop me. And now white says, well, I guess I have no choice. King back. King takes b7. King takes c5. Draw. So let's go through that again in slow motion instant replay just so you get the idea. Rook checks. This is a skewer. This is a combination. We're combining motifs. The first motif is a skewer. The second motif is interference. We're interfering with the piece's abilities to get there. Now black plays a combination. He plays an attraction move, rook to b5, rook to b4, forcing white to take. And now he clears out c7 with check. And no matter how white plays it, it's a draw. We just saw king takes c5, king c7 was a draw, and we played out king b5, king c7, king a6, king b8, and now white has nothing better than to go after the pawn. King b5, king takes c5. Okay, So that's the Loman idea, is to play the deflection of the rook over here. Now what can we do with this idea to make it even more interesting? Well, let's turn on our palette. We do board pieces palette. And we can change the position now with the palette by adding a pawn to A2. And the question is, does that make any difference? Well, if you go through the sequence that we just went through in our head, it doesn't seem to make any difference, because at the end of it all, when the smoke clears, white will end up with an A pawn and black will be within the square of the corner, and the game would look like a draw. For instance, if you superficially think about it that way, rook checks, king takes, b7, rook b4, king takes b4, c5, and now again at some point he's got to take that pawn or it gets a queen, king c7, and then king b5, king takes, a4, draw. So the other one was a draw, this one looks like a draw. What's the difference? Well, sometimes little things make clever differences. So adding that pawn on a2 now gives us the following sequence, which is very pretty. Rook d8 check. All right, there's our skewer. Black has to take king d8. b7, threatening to get a queen. If he gets a queen, he wins. Black says, let me attract you to that b4 square so I can check you. White takes, king takes b4, and there's our c5 check. Now let's go back through that line where white tries to save the pawn again. King to b5, threatening king a6, king a7, winning. So black has to play king c7, and white plays king a6, threatening king a7 and queen. Black has to go king b8. Now without the a2 pawn, white has nothing better than to catch this pawn. But now white says to himself, I don't need to catch that pawn. I can let you get a queen. So he plays king b6, stalemating the black king. But of course it's not stalemate because black can move a pawn. He plays c4. He will queen first, of course. a4, c3, a5, c2, a6, c1 queen, but unfortunately not winning. White has a7, checkmate. So adding that pawn on a2 makes all the difference. Now the deflection wins. Rook checks, king takes, b7. Rook here, only try. If he lets white get a queen, he'll win in different ways. King takes, check, king up. If he pushes the pawn right away, then white will simply play king a6, c3. Well, he can't push the pawn right away. What am I saying? If he pushes the pawn right away, white gets a queen. So black, of course, has to play king c7 first. I was thinking the king's already on c7. If the king goes here and now he pushes the pawn, white plays king a7 and queens first. That's why black has to play king b8. And now the crazy move, king b6, and both sides are free to push pawns. Black will get a queen, white will only get a checkmate. All right, so that's our second and third examples. Let's make it even more complex. Let's pull up this example. White to play. Well, we have our familiar Loman kind of theme of how do we stop this pawn from getting a queen? Doesn't look easy at all, does it? Well, white can try the Loman-y kind of move, b5 check. All right, so black has three moves, but all three sort of let white do the same thing. Let's show you. If he plays king a5, then white will play check. And now if black plays king to a6, white will play rook to b5, going after the pawn. If black plays pawn takes, white can just play rook takes with the Loman-y kind of position. And finally, if black plays king b7, white plays check. And no matter what black plays, white can play rook to b5. So that turns out to be the main line. So let's look at that. Pawn up, and we can see it's going to transpose whether he takes the pawn or not. It's going to end up looking like this. So white cannot be stopped from getting the rook to b5. And now, of course, if black wants to queen, he has to take. Otherwise, rook takes b2 will win. And now white gets a check. And now black cannot take the pawn because king c2 will lead to an endgame where white's winning. King takes c4, king c2, Now black has to stay within the square of that pawn, but white has two pawns that can queen. For instance, let's say black plays a5 here. Then white plays g5, king back, and now he plays d4. Well, let's say black plays a4. White can stop and play king takes b2, b5, g6, king e6, d5 check. He can't stop both pawns. He can stop one or the other, but he can't stop both. King f6, d6, one pawn or the other will queen. All right, so let's go back to the start. So b7, b5, c takes b5, rook takes b5, king takes b5, c4 check. We just saw king takes c4 is no good, but black can try that queening trick and then checkmate with the a pawn like we saw in the previous problem. So for instance, if white plays this a little bit carelessly, king b4, king c2, king a3, king b1, king b3, g5, a5, g6, a4, g7, a3, g8 queen, a2 checkmate. So that's just like the last problem. What can white do about that? Well, here's where we get another new twist. b5 check, c takes b5, rook takes b5, king takes b5, c4 check, king b4, king c2, king a3, king b1, king b3. Okay, last time we just pushed the pawn in and got checkmated. So what white needs to do now is sacrifice this pawn. How does that help? Well, if black plays a5, when white takes, he's going to queen first with check before it's mate. And white wins. So after c5, black has to take the pawn. How does that help white? Well, it helps white because now when he queens, it's check. And that makes the whole difference. g5, a5, g6, a4, g7, a3, g8, queen, check. If he puts the pawn in the way, it doesn't matter. Queen b8, check. King a5. King to a2. Doesn't have to play that move. Lots of moves win. And black's in zugzwang here and game over. So let's go through that solution again in slow motion instant replay. We have another twist above the one we just saw. b5 check. And, you know, as we said, it doesn't make any difference. King there, pawn takes. If he doesn't take the pawn, rook b5 will win instantly. He has to take. Rook here, king here, transposes. Pawn check. King b4, king c2, king a3, king b1, king b3, c5. There's the difference between this puzzle and the previous one. B takes c, g5, a5, g6, a4, g7, a3, g8, queen, check, wins. So therefore, after b5 check, black is lost. We just saw the main line. Okay, we have one more twist to add. And that is, does it have to be a rook? Could it be another piece? And the answer is yes. And this is a very clever puzzle that someone composed. White to play and draw. All right, so what should his first move be? The first move is bishop c5 check. Well, what can black do? If he moves his king to d5 or c6, then knight checks and knight takes pawn will get the pawn and draw easily. Notice in this position we have that same Loman kind of problem. How do we stop the pawn from queening? The king can't go to b1, the king can't go to b2. So we said bishop c5 check, and we just said he can't go to c6 or d5 because it's an instant draw. So what he has to do is take the bishop with the knight. Seems reasonable. And now white pushes his pawn. The idea of pushing the pawn is simply that, sorry, I misspoke here. If knight takes c5, then you push the pawn. And now black has a problem. If black plays king back to guard the pawn from queening, then white will play knight checks, king takes, knight b3, knight a1, and he's even going to win this position. If if on knight takes and white plays c7 and black plays knight takes a6, white will simply get a queen, black will get a queen, and white queen can just start checking the black king all around the board. The black queen is out of play, and the queen and the pawn can easily draw against the queen and the knight here, especially with the first move. So after bishop checks, we just saw king c6, knight b4 is a draw. King d5, knight b4 is a draw. Knight takes c5, c7. If he brings his king back, white gets the check. If he ignores him and lets him get a queen, he doesn't have enough material advantage to win. So the only move left for black is to play king to e5. All right, so what does white do now? Well, white can again push the pawn, threatening to get a queen. All right, what's black going to do? Well, he has to take that pawn with a knight. And now white plays bishop checks. All right, so black again has a problem. If he moves away from the bishop, then white will simply play b4 and guard the promotion square and easily get a draw. So therefore, and if he goes to a white square, not only can white push the pawn and bring the king back, since the bishop's still guarding that promotion square, he could also check and pick off the pawn. So he has two ways of getting a draw if black plays king d5 or king e4. So the only move left for black is to play king takes d4, but this is the attraction we were looking for. Now white plays knight to c5. And if black gets a queen, white will fork the queen. If he gets a rook or a bishop, he'll fork that. If he gets a knight, the two knights cannot win against the knight and the pawn, so that's not a problem. And finally, if black takes that knight, white will play the Loman move, b4 check, and no matter how black gets out of check, white will play king to b2, and black's only going to be left with a king and a knight, which is not enough to mate, so it's a draw. Okay, let's go through this complex Loman idea again. White to play and draw. Bishop c5 check. If king c6 or king d5, knight b4 draws. If knight takes c5, c7, king d7, knight takes, and knight b3 is draw. If black simply gets a queen here, white will get a queen, draw. So therefore, black's best try is to play king to e5, his only other legal move. But after king e5, white plays first c7, threatening to get a queen, which would actually kind of win the game. If black gets a queen and white gets a queen, white's up a bishop. So black would play knight takes, still hoping to get that queen. And now white plays bishop d4 check. If black doesn't take the bishop, then white will play b4 and the bishop would be guarding the queening square. And if he takes the bishop two moves later, then white can play king to b2. For instance, king to e4, b4, king takes d4, king b2, draw. Okay, so that means he has to take the bishop, but now knight to c5, and there's our Loman move. Similar to the rook moves in the other problems, we're deflecting the king to a square where we can check him. And the problem is, if he gets a queen now, he gets forked, and let's say he doesn't. Let's say he just moves the knight. Then white can simply play knight b3 check, and then block the queening square, and this position is a draw. So that means that after knight c5, if black takes, white sacrifices the pawn with the Loman idea. King takes b4, king b2, and the game will be a draw. Okay, so what have we done? We've taken a basic idea. Let's go back to our first position. We've taken a basic idea, which is, can we deflect the king away and get a queen? And now we built the Loman defense into that, which, oops. We built the Loman defense, which is rook check, king takes, pawn up, rook here, Loman's idea, to attract the king to a square where you can check him, and now you get the draw. What do we do from there? We build upon it and build upon it and build upon it. We added a pawn over here. Now the same sequence. The Loman defense. And then we have the anti-Loman maneuver here. And we kept building on this and building on this till we got all 5 of our problems. So we started with deflection to get a promotion. We started with the Loman defense to stop the promotion, and then we build it up from there. Now, what good is this stuff? You might say, well, I'm never really going to be in a Loman position in my life. Well, the first deflection you might actually be in. That's a pretty common tactic. The rest of them, like the Loman defense, is pretty rare. But what happens when you do a lot of these problems and you build up your tactical ability is you start to see what the power of the pieces is and what they can do. This is why board vision problems, which, you know, I'll do some board vision problems in a future video. Like maybe I'll feature switcheroos in a video. But when you do board vision problems and you build up your vision of the board, even if you're doing problems that can never occur in a game or would never occur in your position, just doing problems that will never occur in your game doesn't mean it can't help you, because the idea of how the pieces work together and how they coordinate is really, really important, and what the pieces' power can do. And just because the position you're studying will never come up in your game, it doesn't mean it's not helpful. It's sort of, I always make the analogy between lifting weights and playing football. If you were my football team and I said to you, in the off season we're going to lift weights and we're going to get stronger so we're better at football, and one of my football players came up to me and said, I've never seen a barbell on a football field. I'm not going to do anything that's not going to help me play football better. I'm only going to do things that help me on the football, that actually can occur on the football field. The answer is no. You can indirectly help yourself by lifting weights and making yourself stronger so that when you play football, you can play football better. And that's true in chess too. Your brain can see things on a chessboard that may never occur in a game that make your game better. I've heard this argument so many times, people saying to me, if it can't occur in a game, I don't want to see it. Or if I'm going to play over games from a game book, I only want to play games from the openings that I play. That's such baloney. You want to play over as many games as you can. Ideas that occur in the French could happen in the Sicilian. There could be an endgame from a Roy Lopez that will happen in your Caro-Can. There can be an idea of a sacrifice in a game from a let's say a coal system that occurs in your Nimzo Indian. These things are all going to help you. Yes, if you're looking at just the opening, that will help you a little tiny bit more. But a lot of times when you study these things, I found studying the kind of puzzles that can't occur in games to be both tremendously fun and very, very helpful to my game. There must be some reason why good players get good. And we don't have a mind that's closed and says, all right, I'm only going to study things that happen in a game because that's the only thing that makes my chess better. That's just not true. Okay, for our YouTube channel, this is Dan Heisman. I hope you enjoyed our Loman series today, and I hope you'll subscribe to the channel if you like it. I hope you'll tell your friends. And we have all kinds of videos. We've already done some on opening tabayas. We've done amateur games. If you have an amateur game, go to my website, danheisman.com. Email me the raw score of the game. I will take a look at it if it's interesting. I will put it in my videos. I'll be doing think out loud games against the computer. We did one of those. We have these kind of puzzles. We're going to do some puzzles that, as I said, can't occur in games, but you still learn a lot. We're going to do everything we can to teach you how to play chess better. Okay, hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye.